Hey everyone, today we're diving into a heartbreaking case that shook the small town of Bardstown, Kentucky. This is the story of Crystal Rogers, a devoted mother whose sudden disappearance sent shockwaves through her community. Crystal was known for her unwavering dedication to her 4 children, despite sharing custody with her ex-husband, Keith. She had a close bond with her youngest son, who was just 2 years old, and living with her boyfriend, Brooks Hall. But on July 5, 2015, everything changed. Crystal's mother, Sherri Ballard, grew increasingly concerned when her daughter failed to answer her calls. It wasn't like Crystal to be out of touch for so long, and Sherri's maternal instincts told her something was seriously wrong. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Crystal, Sherri's worry turned into full-blown panic. She reached out to Crystal's friends and family, hoping someone had seen or heard from her. But the response was always the same: silence. Even Crystal's sister, Brooke, couldn't shed any light on her whereabouts. It was as if Crystal had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and shattered hearts. Join me as we delve deeper into the mysterious disappearance of Crystal Rogers and uncover the truth behind this tragic case. Brooke shared with her mother that she had spoken with Brooks, Crystal's boyfriend. Brooks informed her that he had not seen Crystal since Friday. According to Brooks, the last time he saw her, she was up playing games on her phone before he went to bed. When Brooks woke up the next morning, Crystal was gone. He speculated that Crystal may have gone to visit her cousin's house to celebrate the 4th of July. However, Sherri's concern grew as she struggled to get in touch with her daughter. Sherri reported Crystal missing to the police department. And as she was there, her son Casey received a phone call from a friend who had seen Crystal's car on the side of the road. This discovery worried Casey and his father, Tommy Ballard, as they knew Crystal would not have abandoned the vehicle of her own accord. Upon receiving the call, Casey and Tommy felt a sense of dread in their stomachs. Upon arrival at the location, Casey and Tommy saw Crystal's car, which had a flat tire. However, this discovery only reinforced their belief that something was seriously wrong. Crystal had encountered car trouble. She would have certainly reached out to one of them for assistance. The idea that she would have pulled over and tried to fix it on her own was unfathomable. As they examined the car further, Casey and Tommy noticed Crystal's keys, phone and purse on the passenger seat. These items served as additional evidence that something was amiss. Crystal would not have gone anywhere without her belongings, and their presence in the car further heightened their fears for her well-being. They questioned why Brooks could not have handed her the phone and had the conversation right then and there in the midst of Brooks's interview. He received a phone call from his brother Nick, an officer at the Bardstown Police Department. Nick advised Brooks to exit the interrogation room immediately. The police were not convinced that Crystal had run away and abandoned her car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. It seemed to the police that something had happened to Crystal while she was at the Brooks HW family farm. As the investigation into Crystal's disappearance continued, people called the police and reported seeing Brooks's truck and his brother Nick's police car at the Hall family farm. Detectives became convinced that the brothers were at the farm disposing of evidence in Crystal's disappearance. To gather more information, the police decided to call in Nick Brooks's brother for questioning. They confronted him with the fact that he had been spotted at his family's farm on July 8th, and asked him to explain why he had been there. However, Nick denied having any knowledge of what they were talking about, and claimed not to have been out there that night. Despite Nick's denial, the police pressed on and asked him point-blank if he and his brother had destroyed or hidden evidence involving Crystal's disappearance. Nick adamantly denied that they had engaged in wrongdoing and insisted that his brother could not harm someone. Furthermore, he said there was no conceivable scenario where he, as a police officer, would have assisted Brooks in covering up a crime. After the interview, the police asked Nick if he would be willing to take a polygraph test, and he agreed. Nick failed the polygraph on 2 questions. The first question was, "Do you know where the Crystal is right now?" The second question was, "Are you hiding any information about what happened to the Crystal?" Despite failing the polygraph, Nick maintained that he was being 100% honest. On October 15th, the police investigating Crystal's disappearance named her boyfriend Brooks as the prime suspect. On the same day, Brooks's brother Nick was fired from his job as an officer at the Bardstown Police Department for impeding their investigation. Even though the police were fairly sure they knew who caused Crystal's disappearance and how she died, they didn't have enough evidence to make an arrest. The police feared taking their suspect to court and not having enough evidence if the suspect were to get acquitted, The police couldn't charge them with Crystal's murder again because of double jeopardy. FBI agents and law enforcement agencies across Kentucky joined forces with Crystal's friends, family, volunteers, and missing people organizations to conduct extensive searches at the Houck family farm, a sprawling property spanning 240 acres. The searches continued daily, leaving Crystal's loved ones terrified and grasping for hope. While they hoped to find Crystal alive and well, they truly desired some answers. At the H family farm, investigators conducted a thorough search of the ashes of a fire, but no human remains were uncovered. However, in the pile of ashes, remnants of clothing were found, but the investigators were unable to connect these pieces to the case of Crystal's disappearance. Disappearance. The police served multiple search warrants on the Houck family farm, targeting cars and residences. Despite their efforts, none of these searches yielded significant leads or evidence related to S case. A $100,000 reward was offered for information about Crystal's disappearance, but still, no one came forward. Tommy Ballard, Crystal's father, followed every lead he got in Crystal's disappearance. He was determined to find his daughter and was not going to give up. Crystal's disappearance affected Tommy more than it did anyone else who loved her. Because in January 1979, his pregnant sister was murdered by her husband and his friend. They shot and beat her, and then set her remains on fire and scattered them on a farm. The men who committed this heinous crime were eventually caught years later and found guilty, sentenced to life in prison. Despite the challenges he faced, Tommy remained steadfast in his pursuit of Crystal's whereabouts. Tommy followed every lead, no matter how small or insignificant it may have seemed. He canvassed the neighborhood, conducted interviews, and reached out to anyone who might have information. Tommy, determined to find answers about his daughter's disappearance, allocated his savings towards hiring cadaver dogs and a private eye. With each passing day, he kept meticulous records of all the tips he followed and every clue he uncovered. His dedication to the investigation led him to meet frequently with the police, to share his findings and seek their guidance. In November 2016, Tommy Ballard took his 11-year-old grandson, Crystal's son, out on an early morning hunting trip on their property. Tommy's wife, Sherri, watched them leave, feeling a sense of unease. She quickly prayed to God for a watchful eye over them in the woods. Sherri returned to her bed, trying to relax. However, only minutes later, a phone call shattered her peace. Sherri recognized the voice of her grandson, Crystal's son, filled with panic and terror. "Papa has been shot," he cried. Panic washed over her as she quickly dressed. Sherri's mind raced with thoughts of her husband's well-being. When Sherri arrived at the scene, she was immediately overcome with grief. She rushed over to Tommy, shaking him frantically. However, as she did so, she noticed a concerning sight. Blood began pouring out of his nose. The officers and witnesses who had arrived quickly pulled her off Tommy so that the medics could work on him. However, Sherri was already aware that her husband was gone. Tommy Ballard was pronounced dead at the scene. Tommy Ballard had been shot once in the chest. Initially, the police claimed that Tommy's death was the result of a hunting accident. However, Sherri was furious upon hearing this declaration. She insisted that this was no hunting accident, but rather a murder. "This is my husband, and it's a murder, and you know it," she exclaimed. After an investigation, the Kentucky State Police later informed the public that they were investigating the death as a murder. The Ballard family believes that Tommy was murdered because he was getting too close to uncovering the truth about what happened to his missing daughter. They think the people responsible for hurting Crystal wanted Tommy out of the way, fearing that he might reveal the truth. In 2022, the FBI conducted a 5-day investigation into the disappearance of Crystal. Investigators returned to the Houck family farm, hoping to find more evidence. The FBI's goal was to collect evidence that would help them hold the individual responsible for Crystal's disappearance accountable. Despite not revealing if any items of evidentiary value were recovered from the search, an FBI spokesperson confirmed in October 2022 that the agency would be analyzing all of the evidence collected at the FBI's lab in Quantico. As the investigation into Crystal Rogers' disappearance continued, the Kentucky Attorney General made a crucial decision to appoint a special prosecutor to assist in the prosecution of criminal charges related to the deaths of Crystal Rogers and her father, Tommy Ballard. Crystal's mother, Sherri Ballard, was aware of the appointment and wholeheartedly supported the decision. She believed this measure was necessary to ensure justice was served in her loved ones' cases. Subscribe for more chilling cases.